First thing we're going to do is get the car up in the air, and since we need the rear of the car in the air, I found it kind of easier to lift from here. So I just have the jack under here, and I'm going to lift it right in front of the subframe connector so that I'm not pinching anything. And once I get the back end of the car up in the air, then I'll put the jack under there and then go around the other side and just make sure that we have it secured on jack stands in the rear. Alright, so as you can see, I've lifted up with the jack, and now I'm just going to support it with this jack stand. I'm going to put it right on that box back here. So then I just came around the other side and lifted up on the front as well, just to get this back part in the air. So then now, as you see, we're going to have plenty of room to work here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is remove the wheels, and we're also going to have to remove the brakes. Alright, so with the e-brake on, I broke all the lug nuts loose. Now I just have a little impact gun just to kind of speed the process up. Okay, now we'll just take the wheel off, and that'll expose our brake and caliper. Set the wheel aside. Alright, now with the wheels removed, it's a good idea to go and take the drive shaft off. And we're going to take it off where it connects to the axle in the back. Alright, so here we are into the car. We have the drive shaft coming back from the transmission, and this is where it meets the yoke. And to take off these 4 bolts that are on the yoke drive shaft where they meet up, we're going to use this 12mm. See how it has multiple points in it? We're going to use that because the heads of these are multi-pointed as well. 12mm seems to fit on there just about perfect. And to help us with this, because part of the drive shaft can get in the way, I'm going to use an extension that'll kind of get me past the drive shaft clearance. And also I have one of these U-joint attachments that comes in handy often too, so you can get in there and turn it without using the extension. So here you can see I have the 12mm socket on here. I have an extension to help me clear the drive shaft and a breaker bar. And I'm going to turn this counterclockwise. Remember, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So we're going to turn it counterclockwise and break this loose. Okay, so now I'm just going to come into the car. I'm going to put the parking brake down, and I'm also going to make sure that the car is in neutral. Okay, so now I'm just going to turn the drive shaft to expose the next bolt right here. And then go back up and just pull the e-brake on the car. Then I'm going to break that one loose, and same thing until they're all loose. Okay, and so now I'm just taking these out now that they're broken loose, and you can have the e-brake off for this part. And just keep spinning it until you get them all out. As you can see here, I'm keeping the lug nuts and the drive shaft bolts and everything kind of together here. What I also like to do is put them in Ziploc bags and label everything, just so that you don't forget where anything goes. But just make sure you keep everything together. Now on the drive shaft there's a painted mark from the factory, and they like you to line it back up. Let's see if I can even still see mine, but basically sometimes you'll find like a yellow dot here and then one also on the drive shaft, and so when you're putting it back, just make sure those match up. Now to remove the drive shaft, I'm just going to pull it forward towards the front of the car, and you'll see how it goes on here. There we go. So now I'm just going to set it down, just kind of let it, it's going to rest on the X pipe a little bit, and that's fine. If you were to pull the drive shaft out of the transmission, you would lose transmission fluid. Now we have the yoke and the pinion nut are exposed, and that's as far as we're going to go with here, but you can see where the drive shaft was, and so when you put it back on, just make sure it matches up to those bolts. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is make sure that the parking brake is not on, so that we'll be able to take the caliper off of the disc. So we're going to take this red part off, and To do that, there's a bolt right here on the back side, and there's another one down low right there. So we're going to take those two bolts off and be able to slide the whole caliper off of the disc. Now I have my 15mm wrench, and I choose not to use my ratcheting ones for this just because, well, you'll see. What we're going to do is put it on the back side of this caliper bracket, and then we're going to hit it with a hammer right on the side just to break it loose. And so since we're going counterclockwise, remember you're looking at the bolt backwards, so we're going to hit it what would appear to be clockwise. And so we're going to do that to break that one loose. Okay, so as you can see, I broke it loose and now it's ready to go. So that's the top one. Now on the bottom one we have a little bit of a complication because you have the brake line. See right here you have the rear emergency brake line that comes over, and it goes right in front of that bolt. Now what I'm going to do now is disconnect the parking brake line. So as you can see, it's a line that comes up through here. There's no fluid in it, you know, it's a cable. And it comes up into this mechanism here. What you can do is kind of put a pry bar here and rotate the assembly, which I don't recommend because the spring actually comes up into here and you don't want it to come undone. Something you might be able to do, which I was just because the brakes were loose enough, grab a pair of pliers and just pull, and you can just pull it right out of this loop, just pull it right out, and then pull the whole housing right here away. So that's how you can undo the brakes. There's also a little C-clip right here that you'll pull out to be able to pull the brake line through that hole. Pull it right on through. So here we are on the top. I'm just going to get this one out and set it aside. And on the bottom, what I've been doing is just going at it slowly with the regular wrench open end, and I've been pushing the caliper towards that way so that it's not eating away at the brake line. So I'm not contacting the brake line by applying pressure against it. So as you can see, this bolt is now not contacting the caliper anymore. It's been completely removed. The one's off at top as well, so now all we have to do is just slide the caliper off of the disc, and we're going to make sure that we either hang the caliper up here with the car where it's not going to hang by the actual brake line, or set it down on like a bucket or something that'll keep it up, but we just do not want to suspend the caliper on its own. So as you can see here, I just zip tied the caliper. Remember, not by the line, that's not doing you any good. Make sure it's actually around the caliper housing here where it's not going to hurt anything. And I just zip tie it up around so that those are not hanging. And this is on the other side of the car. I'm ready just to remove this brake and move on. Sometimes you'll find a little ring right here, like a washer, that just kind of goes over there and holds the disc on. So just make sure you take that off with a screwdriver. The axle does have the springs that are pushing against it, so it's a good idea to put some floor jacks underneath the rear end and support it, and then undo all the bolts and slowly let it down. And I'm also going to have a friend help me with this just because there's a little bit of extra precautions that you need to take. Alright, so the next part is to take off this stabilizer strut. And to do that, we're going to just put a 15mm wrench on here and pound on it to loosen it. If you look close right here, this looks like a little nut, but it's not. It's actually either welded to this or whatnot. So we're going to go on the back side of it, pound it loose. Alright, so after we get this bolt out, we're just going to move the stabilizer up out of the way and put the bolt back through so we don't lose it. Alright, now we're going to remove this rear strut or shock absorber, whatever it is. And to do that, we're going to have a 15mm on this side, and I believe it's an 18 and an 18 on this side. Okay, so basically you're just turning these opposite directions. We're also going to use the jack to put just a little bit of pressure on the axle. Even though the wheels are off the car and the suspension looks like it's all the way down, it's not. And so make sure that you have plenty of support under the axle. Okay. Alright, so now that we got the nut off the back of it, we're just going to give it a little bit of a pound. And pull it out of there. Sometimes you can just get a screwdriver as well. Okay, lift up on this. There you go. There we go. And then pop it out. And we're actually going to move this out of the way, put the bolt back. That way you always just remember the way that it came off and you don't lose it. Okay, now we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. We have a jack underneath here to lift up or drop according to how much we need to get this, this bolt out. If you have it too high or too low, then the strut's going to be in your way. It's going to be fighting against you. So just lift or lower with the jack just to be able to pull these out smoothly. And once again, just put it back in its place and you have one last nut and bolt to remember where it goes. Alright, so what we're doing now is taking off one of these other bolts that's on the axle. And as you can see, this is kind of a hard angle to get in with the sway bar and everything. And it's a really tight one, so one technique that you can use if it's got too much pressure on it, as you can see, I'm just putting the jack underneath the wrench. And as I lift the jack, there, it broke it loose. So that's something that you can do. Now, after you do that though, immediately put the jack back under here, because as soon as you take this bolt out, you're going to have a lot of pressure from the spring on the suspension that's going to be pushing down. So just support it again, and then go ahead and continue breaking that loose. Alright, so I have my 18mm on the inside, and then I have a 22 on the outside, and it's just a little bit big, so I'm just being careful just to kind of hold it in place and use this other wrench to do all of the turning. So just remember though to have the jack under here, because you have the spring, you have all the pressure of the spring under here. And if you pull this out, first of all, to be able to pull this bolt out, you're going to have the jack, you're going to have the jack right in the right spot so that the bolt will pull through without any pressure on it. But then just be careful that when you go to lower it, that it doesn't just pop out on you. Getting pretty close there. Okay, so that side's off. Okay, so once you get that nut off, just lightly with a hammer, just kind of tap to feel. So that feels good. It's coming right out. You don't want to pound it. And then you can see it jump like that, and then we'll just pull it through the other side. Alright, so now I have an 18mm socket and a open end wrench here. There's a bolt on this side, a nut on the other side, and so I'm just taking it off. We're going to take it off here and here, and then there's nothing else that's holding the axle. We're going to slowly let it down, and we're going to get the springs out. When we take the springs out, we want to mark the relationship of how the spring went on to the control arm. Alright, so as you can see, we've removed the control arms up top. Okay, we've removed the shock absorbers, struts, whatever you want to call them, and everything else is undone. Okay, my assistant is holding the front of the axle. Now we're going to just slowly let down the jack on each side. You probably could get away with just one jack in the middle, but anyway, as we do that, the springs are just going to eventually be undone. They're not going to have any more tension on them, and be good to go.
Gear oil.
Yeah. So now we're going to just lift up over the sway bar and down onto the ground. What we had to do was just lift up between, you know, the spring where it came out and push the shock absorber up over the axle, and then move the axle up over the sway bar. You could disconnect the sway bar if you wanted to. Then we just brought it around, and here she is.